I thought killing him would silence the fire. It didn't. It only changed its color. The night I put Saitō in the ground, the flames that kept me alive for 16 years went from white to ash blue, quieter, colder. The heat pulled inward where only I could feel it. I used to think revenge was a blade, sharp, clean. You draw it, you cut, you sheath it, and the world is different. The truth is uglier. Revenge is a tree set alight while you are nailed to it. Even after the trunk collapses, the embers cling. They wait for wind, they wait for memory, they wait for a name spoken in the dark. I am Atsu, the little wolf everyone kept trying to leash, and I am tired of that fire owning my breath. Listen. The logs pop like bones in a hot pan. Pine smoke crawls along the ground and into the throat. A kettle drum wind walks the slopes of Yōtei and makes the cedars sway like watchmen with heavy heads. The ginkgo behind my shoulder wears late yellow like a quiet banner, and the frost at its base catches the firelight the way old scar lacquer catches moonlight on a cracked mask. If you close your eyes, you can hear the mountain chew the cold. Good. Keep them closed. You'll see what I see anyway. When I was 10, they put my father's iron through me and pinned me to a burning tree. That was my first death. I learned 2 things as my shirt caught and the bark blistered. The first, blood steams when it hits hot wood. The second, a child's scream only travels as far as the men who caused it want it to. Past that, it becomes a prayer the gods don't hear. The Onryō the villagers whisper about? They built her that night. They gave me her teeth and called it justice when I used them. But I am getting ahead of myself. Or maybe I'm not. I don't tell stories the way priests do. I tell them the way fighters remember, by tastes and cuts and the sounds a man makes when his luck runs out. You want my voice. Not the one the stage players put on when they paint their cheeks and hiss like snakes about the Ghost of Yōtei. You want the gravel. You want the way my words lean on the truth like a drunk leans on a door, hard enough to make it open. Fine, I'll give it to you straight, and if you flinch, I won't stop. I've been a blade most of my life. Tonight I will be a whetstone. Let me grind something clean. Let me leave you with an edge you can use. The mountain knows me. That's not vanity. It is practice. Cold is a master that doesn't shout. It teaches with silence, and if you don't listen, you die. I learned to read snow the way my father read iron, where it will drift, where it hides hollows, the places it gives a man a second step, and the places it swallows him. I learned the wind's moods by the way it combed the wolf's fur at my knee. I learned that the forest has a pulse, and if you steady your own breath, you can feel it in your ribs. These aren't tricks. This is what a life gives you when you live in it instead of above it. Samurai talk about codes written on paper. I learned the ones scratched into bark by bear claws and left in scat on the trail. If that sounds crude, it's because you've had too much rice and not enough hunger. I'm playing a melody you can't hear. My mother's fingers taught my fingers, and they still move when the fire takes me backward. The shamisen isn't with me tonight. People sleep easier when they don't hear the strings I can pull from the dark, but the way I speak, I still carry the meter in my hands. Short strokes, then a long line. Cut, cut, breathe. You'll find the rhythm soon enough. Here's where it starts for you, and where it started ending for me. Kengo, my father, had arms made of river stone and a back bent like a bow from years at the forge. He stopped serving Lord Saitō when he realized the man would trade peasants for pride. He walked away and took half a village with him, and the other half learned how to live through a winter because of that. Saito's daughter starved that season. This is not a story that cleans itself for company. A girl died. I didn't know her name. I know it now. The dead teach the living even if we refuse the lesson. Saitō learned the wrong one. He thought the world would balance if he tipped a bigger weight onto the other side of the scale. The Yōtei 6, snake, Oni, kitsune, spider, dragon, and Saitō himself came to our door with that math in their mouths and firewood in their eyes. My mother, Yon, had a laugh like water over pebbles. The last sound she made was a rope creaking. I would like to tell you I remember her face without the shadow under it, but memory is a theater where tragedy takes the better seats. My brother, Jubei, was small enough to hide in the smoke. I did not see him after they raised me on the ginkgo and turned the world into a stove. I thought the fire swallowed him whole. I learned later that sometimes the forest chooses who it keeps like a mother chooses which child to lift first when the house floods. I was not the first. They left me for dead because a fox showed mercy, not a spirit wearing a tail, but a woman, Oyuki, who would later say, in that voice of hers that could make sake cups tremble, "I am not your enemy, Atsu." On that night, she proved it by doing nothing. Sometimes mercy is a blade you don't draw. She turned her eyes and let the little wolf slip the iron and fall into the black. The scar on my side runs from hip to breast. When the cold bites it, I remember her hand not pushing me back onto the bark. The first seed of my confusion was planted there. Enemies who act like mothers. Mothers who swing on ropes like empty bells. Saitō thought he ended a line that night. He started one. I crawled from the ashes like a bad omen. Then I grew teeth. 16 years I wandered. 16 winters and summers and all the ugly days between, learning how to turn my body into a map that always led toward the men whose names I kept in my mouth like gravel. You want the South? It smells of sweat and politics. They speak of Sekigahara as if it were a poem, but poems don't leave crows that fat. I fought there, not under a banner, under a sky that couldn't choose a color. Mud took men who thought they were mountains. I learned the spear there from a farmer who lost half his hand and kept his humor. I learned the chain sickle from a woman who charged extra if you asked about the scars on her neck. I learned that honor is just a tax rich men pay themselves and call it virtue. I took what worked and left what didn't. Belonged? Number. Don't look for the noble lesson. This is not a shrine. It is a campfire. It feeds on what you give it. I gave it years, and it gave me heat and the habit of watching the edges. I slept with my back against trees that didn't burn. I ate what ran slower than me. I learned to make men underestimate me, then regret it. Laughter can be bait if you leave it hanging long enough. There's a tone men take when they think a woman is a road they can walk. I learned to make that road end at a cliff. Dark humor. Yes. Better than dark blood. By the time I came back to Ezo, the north was full of men who wanted to be gods and men who wanted to be ghosts. The Matsumae chose walls and ledgers. Saitō chose drums and theft. The Ainu, they chose to keep living between the teeth of those choices. I kept my own counsel. People like to ask, which side? The side that doesn't put a child on a hook. If that offends the map makers, they can draw my answer in the margins. First kill on the list was the snake. He had a way with words and a worse way with poison. I watched him the way a hawk watches a hare that thinks it is alone. In a tavern where the sake was watered and the floor smelled like the bottom of an old boat, I listened to him brag about catching foxes, not with traps, but with mirrors. Men like that forget that a mirror doesn't choose who it lies to. I let him see what he wanted to see. Another traveler, another story to drink. Then, when he reached for the dagger he kept in his boot, I reached for the floorboard he didn't know was loose. A spear of wood can be as honest as steel if you give it purpose. He died looking surprised that the world he arranged didn't ask his permission to end him. I almost died too. The snake left teeth where you didn't expect them, and one found my belly. It should have been the end. It wasn't. I bled in a snowbank and woke up to fish bones laid in the shape of a fox on the ground beside me. The villagers started calling me Onryō after that. Fear puts masks on faces it doesn't understand. I learned to wear mine. People left offerings for a ghost because it was easier than asking a woman what she wanted. The bounty climbed, but so did the stories. I didn't argue with either. The Onryō persona did work no talisman could do. You step out of the tree line with a mask stitched with gold where it cracked, and men think twice about drawing. You whisper a name and the wind answers, and suddenly even swords weigh different. I did not become a ghost to hide. I became one to keep my hands steady. If you do something terrible as yourself, you have to live with it as yourself. As a ghost, you can set the bowl of blame at the grave and walk away lighter. That's what I told myself. Ghosts don't have nieces. Oyuki found me with the shamisen slung over her back like a story she was ready to tell. She was older than the myth named for her. The kitsune I had sworn to cut was this woman who had cut herself free and left her own apprentice to wear the tail. When she played, the air did the thing it does when someone opens a door to a long locked room. It made you remember you were thirsty. She looked at my mask, at the gold seams, at the way I wouldn't let my shoulders soften, and she smiled like a knife laid flat on a table. I expected excuses. I got the truth pressed into my palms like warm rice. I did what I did, she said. I let you live, she said. I'm here because I owe more than words can pay, she said. I am not your enemy, Atsu. I didn't accept it. Not at first. You don't tear a list from your heart because someone sings a pretty song. But I learned from Oyuki the way I learned from the South. Take what works. She could move a body through a room without waking dust. She could map a fortress by the way guards blinked at edge of shift. She could teach a lesson without calling it that. She did not ask for forgiveness. She asked where I wanted to stand when the next blade came. That was a language I spoke. I let her teach me how to be less visible when I needed to be, and how to make a shadow look like two men when I wanted a patrol to split. I let her teach me how to listen. For the moment a lie becomes heavy in the mouth of the man telling it. We made a poor picture together, Onryō and Fox, until the world forced me to admit that poor pictures can still hold truth. We hunted the imposter kitsune and the spider, whose men performed a play of my life that made coin from my fire. I watched actors hang a painted woman from a painted beam. They gave her the wrong song. I didn't rage out loud. I did the arithmetic of doors, walls, and throats. When morning came, the spider's threads were cut. The Onryō left red lines where the stagehands kept their ropes. It was efficient. It was terrible. It tasted like iron and theater dust. I kept walking. I told you I thought my brother was dead. That is what a story gives you when you leave it unfinished for too long. The world wrote its own ending for me. Turned out, it was a lie. When I crossed into Matsumae territory to trade a favor for silence, a samurai officer stepped forward like a memory-given muscle. Jubei. He had taken a lord's name, Kitamori, and a lord's trouble. He looked at me like you look at a mirror you're not ready to own. He wore the clan's code like armor and suspicion like a knife in his boot. He saw my mask, and my friends, and my methods, and he hated all of it. I hated something too. That he survived by swearing to the same ladder of men that let Saitō climb high enough to burn us. Brothers and sisters who survive different winters don't sit down and agree about calendars. We fought together anyway. The Oni didn't care about our arguments. He swung a club like a fallen tree, and when it hit stone, the stone remembered. He killed our father. I didn't say the words when we cut him down because some victories don't need witnesses. Jubei bled and kept moving. I bled and kept killing. After the fight, he fed me fish overcooked on a brazier because he thought burned meant safe, and I told him one meal of overcooked fish doesn't make up for 16 years apart. He laughed, then he didn't. That is how we learned to be brother and sister again. On the edge of too many blades with food between us that neither of us liked, but both of us finished out of respect for the word together. He had a daughter. He didn't tell me immediately. Men with duty like his keep their treasures wrapped in silence. but I caught him looking toward the ginkgo grove every time the wind shifted, as if it could carry a child's voice. Kiku. The name sat in his chest like a bell. When he said it, I heard our mother's laugh for the first time without a rope under it. That is when the Onryō mask began to itch against my skin. The idea of a child seeing me after a slaughter made something small and stubborn in me sit down. We traveled with the wolf by then. He is not mine. He does not belong to anyone. He chose to trot at my heel when the snow was high and the men were worse. He hunted Saito's scouts for his own reasons, and sometimes for mine. The first time he let me touch his shoulder, it felt like pressing a palm to the flanks of the mountain itself. Wild, alive, indifferent, accepting. He bit a man who raised a spear to Kiku and left him with less hand than he brought to the fight. That day I understood the land, and I wanted the same future. Not walls, not banners. A place that survives because it knows how to. When you kill, the world answers. Bounty hunters came with their own codes. A sack of rice and a story about their mother. A promise to the man who hired them. A laugh they pretended didn't shake. I learned every way a man can say please with a blade in his hand. Some I sent home with empty scabbards and a lesson. Some learned nothing until the ground taught them. I do not tell you this to measure my kills like trophies. I tell you because violence has a grammar. If you don't learn it, you end up answering with the wrong tense. Izo was full of wrong tenses. Matsumae scribes wrote on paper. Saitō wrote on people. The Ainu carved memory into wood and lived in the spaces men like Saitō tried to fill with fear. I took work where it bent toward protecting those who couldn't pay some lord to do it for them. I raided stores marked for Saitō and gave them back to mouths that had forgotten how to trust a full bowl. I didn't do it because I'm generous. I did it because a hungry village sells its daughters to men like Snake. I did it because when Oyuki said we owe more than words can pay, I didn't want to be the poorest woman in the room. You want the exact way the Onryō was born? It was on a night I should have died, after the snake, after the spider. A rumor ran ahead of me like wolves run ahead of a storm. She can't be killed, they said. She is already dead, they said. Men love dead women when they think dead means obedient. I let the rumor work. I painted my mask with lacquer mixed with gold, so every crack told the truth, and every seam said, I broke, and I am still here. I learned to step into torchlight the way a storyteller steps into a circle. If a man's courage is a borrowed coat, I learned exactly how much wind to blow to lift it from his shoulders. It was theater with knives. It kept me alive. But the mask eats if you wear it too long. I didn't feel the chew until Kiku saw me after the wrong fight. We had cut a band that took women and broke them into rope. The work was ugly and loud and left me painted red. When the quiet came, I walked into a courtyard where Kiku had been hidden under sake casks. She looked at me like I was the knight that took her father from the shore. She made a sound like a torn page. I reached for her and she flinched. The Onryō does not cry. Atsu did. Not with sobs. With a sound low, and if I had heard it outside my own body, I would have put a hand on the person making it. That was the first time I wanted to take the mask off and bury it somewhere the fox could not find it. Jubei didn't understand Oyuki. He told me duty was a path, and that walking it with a traitor meant my feet would learn bad steps. I told him duty that forgets why it started becomes a leash. We argued the way children of the same fire argue, by throwing coals and daring the other to be the first to kick them aside. He couldn't forgive the kitsune. I couldn't forget the rope. Oyuki stood between us like a bridge and refused to be a wall. She said, I know what I did. I will show you what I am doing. We let her, and she showed us. She showed us patience in small, exact acts. The way she slid a blade through a knot without fraying the rope. The way she told an old woman a dirty joke at the well to make her remember her mouth could make more than laments. The way she didn't touch Kiku until Kiku reached for her first. She showed me a new kind of killing, the kind you perform on your own habits. Don't strike because your hand is heavy. Strike because it's time. Don't speak because it hurts to be silent. speak because you have a truth that will hold when the wind tests it. Ezo grew teeth for us too. The dragon kept men with armor like stolen shrines. We fought him in a valley where the snow was thin and old grass made ropes underfoot. You want tactics? Fine. Short answer. Steal the breath before you steal the life. Wind favors the low ground in that cut. We lit damp straw at the edges and drove smoke down, turned the valley into a bowl of blind men, then moved through it the way water finds a crack. It wasn't honorable. It was right. When the dragon fell, his helm rang like a bell that called nobody to prayer. I took nothing from his body but his promise that I was next on Saito's list. He could have it. I wanted the same thing. The Matsumae asked favors. The Ainu asked stories. Saitō asked death. I learned to answer each in order. For the Matsumae, I cut a deal that left my name off their paper and their coin on my table. For the Ainu, I sat, shut my mouth, and listened to a story about a bear who married a woman and taught her how to fish the winter without breaking the river. For Saitō, I sent him pieces, a banner ripped in half and tied to a stone, the left hand of a captain who liked to touch what did not belong to him, a poem written in a dead man's sack on the door of his storehouse. He read it. He sent men to read it back to me with arrows. The Siege of Matsumae burned like a fever. This is where I became the thing I hated and the woman I had to be to survive the thing I was turning into. He came for the castle. He brought drums like thunder in cages and ladders like teeth. I didn't run. I climbed. I thought if I cut high, the low would save itself. I thought the best way to keep Kiku safe was to make Saito's head roll where his men could see it. That choice cost me. I left a door unguarded because I was guarding my pride. I chased the brighter blood and let the darker ones seep. When the smoke thinned, Jubei and Oyuki were taken. Kiku lived because the wolf did what I forgot to. Watch the ground. You want my worst moment? It wasn't any kill. It was hearing a child say my name with fear in the middle. This is where the story's slope steepens. This is where the mountain shows you a chimney and asks if your lungs are large enough. I shot arrow after arrow into a fog of men who kept making more men out of the mist. I told myself, if I cut the head, the body will fall. I told myself I could do two impossible things with one blade. Saitō taught me otherwise. He held Kiku's name in his mouth when he spoke to me from the wall. He said, "We are the same, little wolf. We both live on what was taken from us." He was wrong, but I believed him for the space of a heartbeat. That was enough to stumble. I will not dress that up. I found where they took Jubei and Oyuki. I went alone because I thought alone meant pure. Purity is a poison with a pretty taste. I stepped through the belly of a fortress that had eaten my childhood home and built its bones from it. Saitō spoke again. He offered a place. Not at his side. In his shadow. Men like him don't share light. I told him the truth that finally fit in my mouth without biting me. My fire was for family. His was for himself. I cut through his guard while saying it, and for a moment, the blade and the words were the same edge. We killed him, Jubei and I, under branches that remembered our names. His death did not make a sound worth keeping, but the sound Jubei made as he slid to the ground. My world learned a new silence then. You know the shape of a mountain by the way it holds snow. I learned the shape of grief by the way it holds a breath and refuses to let it go. He took mine, then gave me another. He put Kiku in my hands without touching her and said, without saying, "Live." He died for his daughter. I had spent 16 years dying for ghosts. That night, I decided to live for the living. You hear the crackle change? The log has a hollow in it. There it is, the small sigh when the ember eats through and the heat suddenly has more room. That's the sound a life makes when the thing at its center finally burns out. 6 months I have been learning how to warm my hands instead of my hate. I plant in the shadow of the ginkgo. I boil water. I listen to Kiku's feet invent games in the dirt. I watch Oyuki's fingers mend things that were never hers to break and choose them anyway. The wolf lets me touch his ear now. That is worth 100 victories inked in a lord's book. I am not a samurai. I am not a shinobi. I am the woman who survived a burning tree and decided not to grow into one. You asked for beginnings. You asked for the early road, the first songs. You have them. Now the world grows bigger and uglier before it gets better. I'll tell you how I learned to speak a new language, one without knives in every sentence. I'll tell you how Oyuki taught me to make peace the way you make tea, by not rushing heat. I'll tell you how I broke the last teeth off the revenge that chewed me from the inside. But I will not pretend the chewing stopped right away. A habit like that doesn't die. You starve it. You feed something else. Origins, then, with both hands open. My father taught iron to remember the shape he wanted. He said it took heat and patience and the right hammer, not just strength. He forged for Saitō and then refused to heat his heart to that man's temper. He taught me the small ways to hold a blade that keep a wrist from dying before its time. He taught me to look at the spine of a sword and know if it will sing or stutter when it meets another. He taught me to laugh at men who call things unbreakable. Everything breaks. What matters is how you choose to mend it. That's why my mask shines where it cracked. Kintsugi isn't elegance. It's honesty. My mother taught me songs that live in the spaces between words. The shamisen was her third child, and the only one she could always feed. Her stories about Onryō weren't warnings. They were maps. She said, "Some spirits walk because nobody told them where to sit. When she hung, I wanted to pull the rope down and name it instead of her." I learned the wrong lesson that night. I learned the map of vengeance better than the map of rest. It took me 26 years to realize rest is the only road that takes you somewhere new. When I first left the grasslands, I walked until my feet were less mine and more the road's. I ate bitterness and fish. I slept in stables and under carts, and once inside a shrine where the god had been evicted to make room for sacks of barley. Men taught me to fight the way men teach, by trying to kill me and being surprised when I learned faster. Women taught me to live the way women do, by placing food in my hand without counting the coins and telling me how to hide a knife in plain sight. I learned to pass as 4 kinds of nobody: a porter with a bad knee, a widow who forgot to keep her eyes low, a boy with a good wrist and a poor face, a drunk who knew where to fall. If you want weapon lists, I can give them. Katana, single and twin. Yari for reach on muddy fields. Kusarigama for the men who think distance makes them safe. Odachi for when you need to say no once and have 50 men hear it. Firearms when a wall refuses every polite answer. But weapons are just dialects. What they say depends on who speaks them. My dialect was practical. Stab where it ends the conversation fastest. Smile when the man across from you expects a snarl. Ask a question your opponent's body doesn't have time to answer, then answer it for them. I took money from men I would later kill. Don't frown like that. Sometimes you have to walk over a bridge before you burn it. I carried messages, escorted caravans, bled for idiots, bled for saints, bled because the weather refused to use a different word for rain. I learned to be stingy with trust. I learned to be generous with silence. I learned that sleeping in armor is a good way to wake up with a spine that says no in every direction. I learned to sleep with knives under both hands and a wolf's patience in my chest. The stories about me started before I earned them. That's the way with stories. They grow out of boredom more than greatness. One winter, I pulled a child out of a river because his mother was too shocked to remember she had hands. I warmed him with my body and the wolf's heat and returned him to a woman who had already decided she'd lost him twice in one life. The village told it as if I walked on water with the boy under my arm and the river bowed. I let them. People need their gods. They need their ghosts. If they chose to make me both, I wouldn't argue until they tried to crown me. Crowns are just heavier masks. The first time Oyuki said my name without my mask on, she said it like a musician tuning a string, tightening until the note sits right. "Do you hear it, Atsu?" she asked. "Hear what?" "The place your breath catches when you lie to yourself. It sits here, just under the notch of the collarbone." She touched mine like I might break. I did not. But I learned to listen to that catch. It told me when I wanted death more than justice. It told me when I had started to enjoy the fear in a man's eyes more than I should. It told me when I needed to say no to myself. You want redemption? Start with that number. It takes longer than killing a lord. It makes you stronger in a way no poem can carry without bending. I visited our old home before the last days. The ginkgo was alive. Of course it was. They live forever, the old men say, because they refuse to choose one season. They keep all of them inside and let the world see which one it deserves. I found the place where my blood had salted the bark. It had grown over, not to hide it but to hold it. That's what trees do when struck. They seal the wound and keep lifting. I pressed my palm to the bulge and said the names I'd been sharpening for 16 years. They tasted like old rice. I spit them out. I still killed most of them, but I stopped believing the names were food. Jubei and I learned how to fight in step again. He led with duty, and I with result. He'd call, hold, and I'd say break. He'd say this gate is defended by men owed respect. I'd say this gate is defended by men who think a girl can't lift an odachi. We met in the middle more often than we failed. He took my blade once, bare-handed, to stop me from drawing in front of a lord whose temper would have changed the shape of a town. He cut his palm and smiled like a fool who had just saved 20 lives with a small hurt. I wrapped his hand without gentleness. He said, "You never belonged to a clan." I said, "Belonged. Number." He laughed like water over pebbles. For a breath, our mother was there between us, alive and full of scold. We hunted the kitsune who wore Oyuki's skin like a story she stole. Dojin thought the tail belonged to her because she could move a man's eyes with one look. She forgot it belongs to whoever chooses to stand when the wind says, "Sit." We lured her with applause. People who crave it never learn not to turn their head when it claps. She died with a song on her lips and a lie between her teeth. Oyuki closed her eyes the way you put away a dish that was beautiful and flawed and not meant to last. No gloating, no tally, just respect for the work and the end of it. Rising complexity, you called it. That's a scholar's phrase. What it felt like was this: more doors, fewer keys, and every corridor had a child's voice at the far end. The Matsumae tightened rules the way a scared man tightens his jaw. Saitō loosened his the way a drunk man loosens his belt. Between them, the people learned to watch the horizon for whoever would step over them next. I learned to move supplies at night. I learned the names of hungry villages and the sound a mother makes when you put rice in her hand without making her beg. I learned the songs of the Ainu well enough to clap on the beat without insulting the bear. I learned that some of the ghosts on these slopes are old as the wind and kinder than priests who tell you your grief is impolite. I painted once, before my hands learned steel as their first language. I did again after I met Kiku. Not flowers, not mountains, not any of the things the nice ladies paint when they want to pretend their cages are gardens. I painted the inside of my head until it stopped feeling like a locked room. Wolves, mostly. Tracks. The shape snow makes when it remembers a body that used to be warm. Kiku looked and saw animals. Oyuki looked and saw a map. I looked and saw proof that my hands could make something that didn't bleed. That's important. Don't trust a person whose only talent is taking. You want the story to rest. It won't. Not yet. The siege is coming, and with it the place where I dropped the wrong stone and started an avalanche I couldn't outrun. You'll want me to say I was tricked. I wasn't. Pride wears a mask too, and it fits too well. Saito's messenger came with the careful politeness of a man carrying a fact he thinks will break you. He said, "Jubei has been seen on the river road." He said, "The castle does not have enough men at the east postern." He said, "Your niece is safe." He said too much. I heard what I wanted. I took my fire to the wall and left a bare floor where my family stood. I did not mean to. But meaning is a candle. Wind doesn't ask it what it wants before it blows. The night before the drums, Oyuki played a song my mother used to hum when she set rice to steam. I could smell it, even without the pot. Wet grain, the sweet that rides the top of starch when it decides to become food. The Onryō sat with us by the fire like a cousin nobody told you was visiting. She didn't speak. She never does. She just let me see how comfortable she'd gotten in my house. I told her to leave. She looked at Kiku and said nothing, the way wolves look at calves when the herd is small. I did not sleep. I counted the nails in my mask and tried to remember which ones hurt when I put it on, and which ones felt like fingers pressing a bruise I mistook for comfort. You can hear when a siege begins by how the world flinches. The birds go first. Then the dogs bark in the same direction like they're pointing with their throats. Then the drums. Then someone lights a banner, because men like to pretend the gods can see their colors. The east postern held. The west gate choked. The ladders came up like ribs around a chest that refused to breathe. We cut. We burned. We threw oil and lies and prayer. Saitō climbed pride like a staircase and spoke to me from the higher land, telling me what I already knew in words shaped to hurt. "We are the same," he said. He wanted me to say yes. I did, in my bones, for a single step. Then I stepped away. The taking of Jubei and Oyuki felt like the fire reaching through time to pinch me by the ear and drag me back to the ginkgo. I ran faster than I ever had, down a corridor that stank of sweat and stale fear. The wolf ran beside me, and when he stopped, I knew there was a trap I couldn't see. I walked into it anyway. You will judge me for that. Good. Someone should. I have enough scars to hang your judgment on without it slipping. Hold a moment. You, here at the fire, feel the heat on your shins, the sap popping in the pine, smoke threading your clothes. Your cup's gone warm. Set it down. Hear the wolf sigh, the ginkgo whisper, the ash settling like quiet snow. Breathe once with me. Good. Stay close. I'll take you into that corridor now. What my blade finally said that cut more than skin. How Saitō died and how that didn't fix what I thought it would, and how I set the mask down and felt my own face again. Keep your eyes on the coals. I'm not finished. The corridor had the stale breath of men who expected to live forever. Sweat, tallow, the thin iron of fear under it. I walked by feel, blade low, palm to stone every third step to hear whose heart belonged to the wall. The wolf's pads were silent beside me until they weren't. He stopped, ears forward, a warning as clean as a bell. I felt the floor change, hollow, then honest, then hollow again. They had built their confidence over a vein of air. Pit. I stepped wide and dragged my breath with me like rope. Saito's men didn't spring the trap until my back was to the narrowest throat of the passage. A good choice. A bad one. Good because it splits a fighter's eyes. Bad because it forces a fighter to become simple. I like simple. A door slammed. A grate dropped. Torches hissed awake like snakes made of fire. 3 men to the front, 2 to the rear, and 1 above with a bow he was proud of. Pride makes noise. I cut the string with a throw. The archer thought I didn't have time to aim. He made a small, offended sound and learned about floors from the inside. The first at my front led with shoulders, as if weight could convince a blade to move aside. I let his momentum carry him into the stone where my head wasn't. The second chose caution. I always respected. I took it from him. The third tried to talk. His words died on the same edge the cautious one met. Behind me, the 2 men were learning to be brave. I didn't give them enough time. The wolf handled one. I handled the other. After, in the ringing quiet, I could hear a girl's voice from far down the gut of the place. Not frightened. Angry. That was worse. anger keeps you from hiding. I found Jubei tied upright, his hands bound higher than his eyes could comfortably rest. He looked smaller without his swords. Everyone does. Oyuki was beside him, shackled in a way that said someone had learned not to underestimate her. She was humming. Of course she was. She sent me a look that knew how to untie knots with eyes alone. I cut Jubei down first. The Onryō would have chosen the threat. Atsu chose blood. He hit the floor, caught himself, laughed once, then stopped when he saw my face. He knew what it meant when I didn't smile. Kiku wasn't there. The anger in her voice had been memory or bait. I felt the mask try to climb back into my hands. The urge to slip it on and become the kind of monster that doesn't feel mistakes was a sweetness in my mouth. I spat. The spittle sizzled where it landed. Lamp oil. I almost laughed. Even the floor was ready to burn. Saitō waited in the courtyard that had eaten my childhood's yard. The ginkgo's shadow cut the flagstones with the same fractured gold as my mask. He had dressed for theater. He always did. Armor polished the way a lie is polished, until reflection makes you think there is depth. He held Kiku by the wrist, gentle enough to prove to himself he could be. He didn't look at her. He looked at me the way a man looks at a cliff and imagines a staircase. "We are the same, little wolf," he said. He said it like a priest blessing a corpse. I let the words sit between us. I wanted to feel nothing. I felt too much. Kiku's nose was red from crying. She wouldn't show anyone. Oyuki's hum had gone quiet behind me, wound tight and waiting. Jubei's breath was a saw through rope. The wolf stood where my shadow ended. If you've never known what side you stand on, look down. The ground tells the truth. "You think I burn because I want the world to say my name," I told him. "You burn because you want the world to say yours. My fire was for family. Yours was for yourself." He smiled like he had just watched me cut my own throat. "You think those are different flames," he said. "All fires eat." He lifted Kiku's wrist as if raising a teacup. "I hate men who touch proof of their power the way they touch porcelain." He said a word meant to make me choose between a clean kill and a correct one. I did not choose. I moved. "If you want technique, you won't get it from me here." I stopped teaching other people how to hurt when I started trying to teach myself how not to. I can tell you this. The first cut is almost always for your own lie. I cut mine at the knee. I stopped believing I could finish this without blood I didn't want to spill. The second cut was for Saito's offered story. He told a tale where we were twins, separated by fate. I refused to speak his family into my mouth. The third cut was for Kiku's fear. You can cut fear. You have to aim where it sits, not where it shouts from. Jubei went left, trading his body for time. Oyuki went low, trading invisibility for opportunity. The wolf went straight, because wolves don't trade. I went where Saitō had already decided I would not, past him. He flinched at empty air. I took Kiku's weight with my free arm and learned again that a small person can weigh more than steel when you're not ready. She clung like ivy that had been taught to be a blade. Good. Fear that moves becomes survival. I put her behind the wolf and let the animal make a wall nobody could buy or bribe. Saito's first true strike came then, clean and fast. A question asked by a man who had never been told his voice could be ugly. I answered with something I learned from a farmer missing half a hand. Angle is economy. We wasted nothing. He pressed. I gave. He retreated to speak again. I didn't let him. Men like him need language to make their cruelty noble. Steel speaks without lying. I will not pretend it was easy. He had the strength of a man who had never had to carry anyone but himself. He had the stamina of a life lived at the center of other people's circles. He had rage. I had practice. He had ghosts he thought I shared. I had ghosts I had already buried without graves. He tried to call soldiers. None came. Not because I had killed them all. Because some had seen enough, and some had mothers, and some had daughters, and some had the tiniest seed of wisdom that sprouts in a man the day he understands he will die and wants the last thing he sees to be something he can carry into the dark with pride. That seed doesn't always grow. It did that day in a handful of men. The rest were already on the ground, with their seeds exposed to the cold. I knocked Saitō to his knees where the roots of the ginkgo pushed the paving into little waves. He laughed, an ugly sound that made the tree look taller. He said, "Kill me and be me." I said no. He flinched harder at that than at my blade. He wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of being wrong. I killed him, not slowly, not with ceremony. I let the blood go into the dirt that had already taken too much from my family. He was a man. He died like one. If you want a grander end, go find a poet. They are cheaper than stones. The sky didn't change. The mountain didn't bow. The wind kept moving because it never stopped for anyone who wasn't a storm. The quiet after is what I remember. That, and the way Jubei sat, his back to the ginkgo as if it could lend him strength. He had been cut in a place that matters, the way a good swordsmith knows where to strike a brittle blade so the crack runs clean. He knew it. I knew it. Oyuki knew it before she reached him. She put her hands to the bleeding because that's what you do even when your body already understands you're wasting nothing but love. Kiku stood very straight. Children do that when they want the world to believe they are taller than their fear. She came to me and took my hand without asking. I became heavier and lighter at the same time. Jubei looked at us, and there it was, a small smile that said the thing his mouth had no room for. He breathed the way a man breathes when his ribs have decided the work is done and the chest is still arguing. He said my name like the first part of a blessing. He said Kiku's like the last. He didn't make me promise. He didn't have to. He died the way he lived these last years, sending the right thing forward. I didn't scream. I had done enough of that when I was 10 to cover 3 lives. I put my forehead to his and let the new silence teach me a lesson the old one never could. We sit with the dead for us, not for them. We learn to name the parts of ourselves that will keep walking because they have to. I named mine Kiku. Then I named another, Oyuki. Then I named a third I had never allowed before, Atsu. We burned Saito's banner, not his body. I'm not his kin. Let his name mold in the earth like damp rice. We took Jubei to the ginkgo grove where the wind remembers better songs. The Ainu say the bear carries words into the sky if you speak them into his fur. The wolf lay with his head on Jubei's knee for a long time. I spoke nothing into that fur. The mountain heard anyway. You expect a fever of victory. You get chores, bodies to move, wounds to clean, promises to make that taste like old iron because your mouth knows how many you've broken to get here. I put my swords away for the night. I warmed stones for Kiku's hands. I sharpened my knife not because I needed it, but because the sound keeps grief from building a nest where it can never be evicted. Oyuki mended Jubei's sleeve even though he would never wear it again. Don't ask why. Hands sometimes need work more than hearts need answers. In the days that followed, the North tried to remember how to breathe. Matsumae wrote letters. More walls, more words. Saito's men either fled or tried to become mice. People started telling the story their way because people always do. I let them. I had my own to write, and I wanted to write it in footsteps and soup and the sound of a child laughing between chores. The Onryō's mask sat on a shelf where the fire couldn't reach it, and for the first time it looked smaller than my face. Do you want the mysteries? There were a few. Who sent the rumor that drew me to the east postern? A Matsumae officer whose ledger owned more ink than conscience. Where did the imposter Kitsune learn her thread cutting? From a man who liked to collect other people's skills and display them in his bragging until the bragging killed him. What happened to the snake's poisons? We found them, sealed them, and fed them to the one plant in the yard that refuses to die. It grew tall and mean and beautiful. I cut it down before its seeds learned the wind. That is the kind of gardening revenge makes you good at. We put jubei in the ground with ginkgo leaves for a blanket. The yellow looked like coins you don't have to feel guilty for keeping. Kiku tucked one into his sleeve and another into my belt. She said, "For luck." I said, "Luck is work you did yesterday pretending to be magic." She nodded like I had told her a joke she'd think about when she was older. Oyuki said nothing, then said everything by staying until the last spade of dirt was patted flat as a tatami mat. The wolf watched the way animals watch, intense and uninterested, both truths in one gaze. If you are waiting for me to say I stopped killing then, you will have to keep waiting. Some work remains after the head of a snake is cut off. Bodies twitch, teeth still bite. We hunted the last of the Yōtei 6's teeth. Not with joy. With the clean efficiency of closing a door in winter. I didn't wear the mask. I didn't need it. When a man has held a child by the wrist like porcelain and spoken sermons to justify it, the world does not require theater to convict him. It asks for proof. I provided it without singing. The last duel that mattered didn't happen with steel. It happened in a room that smelled like rice paste and pine smoke, and the sweetest thread of shamisen resin where the plectrum kisses the string. Oyuki sat with the instrument across her knees. Kiku slept in the corner, mouth open the way children allow their bodies to trust air. I sat with my back to the wall in a habit I was trying to unlearn. Oyuki said, "Play." I said, "I remember enough songs to hurt." She said, "Then hurt correctly." I played the small song my mother used to hum when she found a snag in thread. The tune that makes a knot decide to become a line again. My fingers remembered faster than my pride. I felt the Onryō rise like a guest who has overstayed and wants one last cup. I kept playing until she had to choose between leaving and learning a new rhythm. She left. Not forever, but enough. The mountain's breath came in through the cracks in the shutters and the sound tasted like pine. I cried without hiding it. Oyuki listened without pretending it was a secret. 6 months have a way of fitting a lifetime into their sleeves if you stop teaching every hour to sharpen its teeth. We planted. Kiku pretended not to be fascinated by worms and then admitted it with the kind of laughter that adds days to your life. The wolf learned which hens belonged to us and which belonged to neighbors, and only stole from us when he felt like making a point about closed doors. Matsumae officers came and went with faces like corners. I traded them honesty for distance. Don't mistake it for friendship. Respect is a currency I can spend without hating myself. Oyuki became exactly what she promised, not the woman who took my mother's breath, the woman who saved mine, then saved it again. She taught Kiku how to step like wind in a room full of sleeping men, not to make a thief, but to give a child power where men think they own it. She taught me patience in the only way I could learn it, by making me teach it to a small person who counts to 3 and believes the world will obey. Sometimes it does. When it didn't, I learned to be the 4th number. There were nights I woke tasting ash, the tree, the blade, the rope. Some scenes don't leave your eyes even when you close them. I used to rise, mask already in my hand without knowing I had reached for it. Now I rise and put my palm to the wolf's ribs where the breath goes in. I count. In, out. I tell myself the truth in the simplest words. You are not on fire. You are not a ghost. You can choose. People asked for the Onryō. They always do. Stories want their monsters to stay in costume. A merchant brought rice and a rumor and asked me to scare his rivals by standing at the edge of their warehouse roof with my mask on while the moon was full. I said, "Find your fear somewhere else." Another asked for the Ghost of Yōtei to bless his son's sword. I said, "Ghosts don't bless. They break." He laughed, then he didn't. It's a hard laugh to keep when you realize the woman telling you a truth could cut you apart, and chooses not to. We made a place, not a fortress, a home that knows how to survive a storm without believing it is the center of one. The ginkgo stood like an old woman who has done too much and refuses to sit until the younger ones learn how to stand their own weight. In autumn, we let the leaves fall and didn't sweep for 3 days as if to say thank you with untidiness. Kiku learned to love the mess. I learned to live with it. Oyuki pretended to complain, and then laughed in that sharp way she does that cuts the complaint into ribbon you can tie a gift with. I started to say yes to small things. A neighbor asked me to mend a kettle handle. I said yes. A boy wanted to learn how to throw a stone without hitting his foot. I said yes. A widow wanted someone to stand at her gate the night men get stupid. I said yes. These aren't heroic things. Good. Heroic things get songs. I'm tired of songs that feed on blood and call it flavor. Jubei's grave became less a wound and more a place. I sat with him. I told him about Kiku's bad jokes and good courage. I told him about the day Oyuki burned the porridge and ate it anyway, rather than admit she had not watched the pot. I told him about the wolf dragging an entire deer leg to the yard like a man who brings too much to a poor feast and then demands applause. I told him about my hands, which had learned how to touch without counting the places a knife would fit. If the dead listen, then he knows. If they don't, speaking still arranges the living into shapes that make sense. There were temptations. Of course there were. Old enemies don't vanish. They sour and seek new containers. A ronin with a jaw like a misset bone came to invite me south. He said the wars would wake again, and coin would sleep heavy in the hands of anyone willing to make maps out of other people's borders. I said, belonged? Number. He said, you think you're done. I said, I think I have work that doesn't stain. He spat. I let him. He left because men like him don't know how to fight someone who refuses the wager. A troupe performed a play about me in a village 2 days' walk away. They sent an invitation. I went. I stood in the back. They gave the woman playing me a voice too sweet and a mask too heavy. They made Saitō cry. They made Jubei live. They made the fox a demon who died to grant me power. People wept the easy way. I didn't correct them. I bought the actor a drink and taught her how to stand like a fighter for 2 breaths, so at least the body would tell some truth even if the words didn't. She thanked me. I left before the 3rd act taught the crowd to misunderstand me further. Kiku asked me one night if I would have killed the girl Saitō lost to hunger if saving my village meant it. Children ask knives of questions because nobody has taught them to wrap them first. I told her the only answer worth giving. I said, I don't know who I was then. I know who I am now. I would give what I have before I take from a child. She said, even the mask? I said, especially the mask. She nodded, serious as a priest. Then she went back to braiding the wolf's tail and trying to pretend he liked it. He didn't. He suffered like a hero, which is to say he hated every breath and kept taking it. You want philosophy. I keep mine in a small box. It contains this: hurt rightly. Heal when you can. If you cannot heal, refuse to hurt for sport. Choose family where blood fails. Accept that the mountain will outlast your grief and that this is not an insult. It's a mercy. Know that every code ever written was scratched by a hand that shook for one reason or another. Write yours in frost each morning and let the sun test it. I speak sometimes with Ainu elders who see the shape of time without needing paper to trap it. They taught me that a story is a canoe. It carries you if you respect the river. It drowns you if you think paddling makes you master of the current. I told them my canoe had been a warboat for so long that my arms forgot how to move slow. They laughed kindly and said, "Your arms will remember when the river forgives." I asked how to make a river forgive. They said, "You stop throwing rocks at it and wait." I have been waiting. It is working. Do I miss the Onryō? Sometimes. There are days when a man's laugh breaks in the wrong place and my blood turns to ice that remembers how to be a blade. On those days, I split wood until the world makes sense in neat halves, or I play my mother's song until my hands ache, or I let the wolf run beside me until my lungs burn so good the bad fire can't find room. The mask stays on the shelf. It is a relic. It taught me things that saved me. It also taught me to enjoy killing more than I should have. Both are true. Kintsugi doesn't hide the crack. It decorates it so you don't forget where you learned. Kiku has a way of talking to the ginkgo that makes me believe the tree prefers her voice. She tells it about boys who teased her and about how she didn't cry, then cried later, and about how that counts as winning too. She asks it what my mother's laugh sounded like without asking me to make it pretty. The tree answers by dropping a leaf on her head. She takes that as approval. Fine. Let her. I have learned not to argue with beings that outlast wars. What do I want now? A small question that used to feel like a pit trap. I want mornings that smell of barley and damp earth instead of oil and iron. I want my hands to know every loose board in our home because I laid them myself, not because I'm calculating an ambush. I want Kiku to grow into a woman who can say no without drawing steel and yes without apologizing. I want Oyuki to live long enough to be annoyed by how long she's lived. I want the wolf to die old under a tree he chose because the shade suits his bones. I want to add nothing to the world that someone else will have to scrape off later. This is the part where a story often pretends peace is a throne and the hero sits on it with clean hands. I won't lie to you. My hands are not clean. They never will be. But they are gentler. They touch a shoulder to turn a child's face away from a corpse, because her eyes don't need that lesson yet. They lift a cup to an old man's mouth, because pride makes him shake. They plant bulbs too deep and learn by failure, and dig them up again because flowers forgive clumsy teachers. They hold a mask and choose not to wear it. That choice is a daily one. I make it like I make tea, attentive, quiet, imperfect, steady. I pass by places that used to taste of fear, and they taste of smoke and fish now. The tavern where the snake bragged has new floorboards. The stage where the spider's ropes creaked hosts a woman who tells jokes so dirty the gods plug their ears and pretend they're offended. The valley where we blinded the dragon grows millet. Men fight over water rights there. Good. Let them argue about irrigation and call it war. That's the kind of fight a village survives. Sometimes, in the very blue before dawn, I feel watched. Not by enemies. By the parts of me that refuse to die because they learned to keep me alive too well to accept retirement. I let them look. I let them see Kiku's footprints from yesterday's game, and the ash circle from last night's small fire, and Oyuki's thimble, and the wolf hairs that collect on every blanket like a tax you pay for living with something wild. I say to those parts, you can stand guard. You cannot drag me back. They are getting used to the rule. A Matsumae officer came one last time to ask if I would put my name on a line that meant their house had done me the favor of tolerating my existence. I told him names on lines are cages with ink for bars. He said, "The shogun will hear." I said, "The mountain hears better." He left me a sack of coin anyway. I left it on Jubei's grave for a night to see if the wind changed. It didn't. I spent it on roof tiles and seed. I slept well. Oyuki once said some debts can't be paid in blood. They can only be paid by living. I understand that sentence in my bones now. It doesn't mean cooking every night or being kind to every stray who thinks your yard is a road. It means refusing to reduce your days to a ledger where every act must balance an old wound. I still owe. I will always owe. But the nature of the debt has changed. I owed my debt a pyre. I paid it. I owed my living a home. I am paying it. Kiku asked if she could learn the spear. I said yes, and the broom and the rope and the word no and the way to laugh when someone tries to crush your mouth. She scowled at the broom and then took it up like a warrior takes a banner. Watching her sweep with that fierce little face, makes me think the world might be salvageable. That's not a small thought for a woman who used to believe the world was only salvageable if you cut off the rotten end and pretended the rest didn't smell. On the first snow, the wolf let me press my forehead to his. His breath steamed against my skin. It was a benediction from a god who refuses temples. I told him thank you for choosing us when he didn't have to. He yawned. He has his priorities. The mountain keeps eating the cold and feeding us water. The ginkgo keeps letting go and staying whole. The fire keeps making music out of wood bones. I keep telling the story, not because I love the sound of my voice, but because silence used to be the weapon held to my throat by men who wanted my grief to be an orphan. It isn't. It has a family now. It sits with us. It takes small portions. It cleans its bowl. It sleeps early. If you brought me your hunger for a legend, I gave you a life instead. If you wanted the Ghost of Yōtei, you got Atsu, who learned to walk without a mask and still swing a blade when it must be swung. If you wanted a clean moral, you came to the wrong fire. The only clean thing here is the frost, and even it takes dirt to make the glass of the world. Here is my last truth, the one I keep for when the night leans too close. Revenge saved me and almost finished the job. Family, chosen and stubborn, pulled me back by the collar. The world didn't get better. I did. That is enough to make a place where a child can learn songs that don't end in smoke. That is enough to stand under a tree that once tried to kill me and feel only shade. That is enough to press a hand to a scar and feel gratitude instead of heat. Listen. The logs pop. The ash whispers as it falls. The wind has a long stride tonight. The wolf dreams, feet twitching like he's chasing something he'll never catch and doesn't need to. Kiku breathes with her mouth open and snores a little, which she denies and which I will never stop teasing her about. Oyuki pretends she doesn't listen to me talk, and then corrects my memory when I lie, which I appreciate more than I admit. The mountain chews the cold and feeds us the sound. When you go, take this with you. Hurt rightly. Heal when you can. Choose your pack. Mend in gold where you break so you never forget what made you strong. Put your mask on a shelf high enough that you have to make a choice to reach it. And if someone tells you we are the same because you both burned once, look down. Find your ground. Listen for the river. If it forgives, paddle. If it doesn't, wait. Both are movement. I am Atsu. I was a little wolf. I am a woman with a home and a scar that has learned to speak softer. The fire is low. The story is not finished, because I am not finished. But this chapter is. Sleep. Let the smoke find your eyes and do its small work. When morning comes, you'll know a song you didn't know you learned. Sing it quietly. That's how the world changes without pretending it didn't hurt first.